the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I was standing by my window on a cold and cloudy day when I saw the hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Undertaker, 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 please drive slow. For that body you are hauling, Lord, I hate to see her go. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. And there you have it, as they say. First segment was bookended by Carter family songs. The first of which, The Wildwood Flower, was my grandmother Dorothy, who I never knew. She tragically passed when I was 2 years old, in 1977. But she loved The Wildwood Flower. That was her favorite song. This fella, Arby Cavness, was a guitar player. When he came courting her, he could play The Wildwood Flower. You know, that was a big deal. And this, you know, the other aspect of this would be, you know, with the circle being, you know, will the circle be unbroken? You see where AP was coming from. It's a very sort of Christian, number one, and very sort of stoically Christian, but it's also it's about family. And so in the first segment of this episode, we talked about cultural conservatism in rural communities. And I think that a large part of the animus that drives that sort of notion in terms of the music, you know, this idea of a conservation of a heritage, when that's anything but what's happened in America. You know, I mean, for instance, German immigrants came with Oompa music. Oompa, oompa, oompa. And Oompa music, of course, became the backbone of much of southwestern country music. Much of country music in general all has this, even the Mother Maybelle, when she's playing those bass notes, boom, 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 there's elements of Oompa music, just as much as there's elements of an Irish jig or any other, you know, Anglo-European folk tune. So there's this melting pot, as I keep going back to, but yet you have this sort of just extremely recalcitrant sort of idea of old time and this tradition, and we've got to hold on to these things. And I think that a large part of that it owes, and this is just my opinion, of course, I think a large part of that is owing to the fact that life is short, and in that you have to deal with death in your life. It's most hard when you're dealing with the death of someone who, you know, really, you know, your mother, your father, someone you're very close to, who you love very much. And processing that can be very, very difficult. There's a great documentary by Rick Burns called Death in the Civil War that I think touches on this well, in terms of the way in which religion has helped people to deal with these things. And it's central to the family. I'll give you an example from my own studies. In ancient Roman civilizations, that's right, ancient Rome. That's right, hey, anybody going to the Colosseum? We're going to go check out the chariot races, you know what I mean? But it's good to be king. The deal with this tangent is, it's a valid one, is that in ancient Rome, there was a type of familial worship that went on, where a patriarch or matriarch would pass away, grandmother would die, and there would be someone brought in to make a cast of her face, to make a mold of her face, to make a mask. Or grandfather, the patriarch, matriarch dies, they make a mask. And then every year, when it comes to the day of their death, there's actors that are brought in that are hired to wear that mask and come out and talk to the family and say, you know, you're doing okay. Hey, Jimmy, I see that you're doing a good thing. You know, that kind of thing. To make them, they're still a part of the narrative well after they have passed. And it's a type of familial worship in and of itself. I know in my own life, I just mentioned my grandmother earlier. My granddaddy Taft was a patriarch in my family, and there's not a person in that side of my family who doesn't think of him that way. And now we are 20 years after his, he's passed. And I think that that's important. I think that's a good thing, personally. But and I think that religion, whether or not, I'm not going to get into religion as or whatever as far as people's opinions and feelings about religion, but rather to say that as a vehicle to help folks deal with death, it is definitely an important thing, and I applaud it for that. But a lot of the cultural conservatism, in my opinion, that it surrounds this culture in the South in particular, but any rural area in the United States during the early part of the 20th century, owed itself to this dealing with death and dealing with family and trying to hold it together, trying to keep up with that past before it got away, because it was important to do so to these folks. And I think that that's understandable. Unfortunately, the notion of clinging to heritage can be tragically misused. Certainly, in our understanding of the 20th century, that's the case. And further than that. But, with all of these different cultures, whether it's Irish or German or French or whatever, they came here and assimilated. It was a melting pot. They tried desperately to hold on to their culture. And in some cases were able to hold out quite a long time. But eventually they were assimilated as Anglo-Europeans. Unfortunately, like if you were an African American, you were not given a choice. Your culture was erased. You were snatched up into slavery and brought here. So that's a whole other conversation. But and everyone should have that, sort of pride in their who they are, as long as it's not in some way, hurting someone else's way of being, who they are. In my opinion, we're getting a little out of the academic world, aren't we? So anyways, let me reel it back into myself and everything, and the music. So Mother Maybelle invents a style that is a progression. It's a moving forward of the form that ends up being very influential. But I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about some more culture stuff. But ultimately, she's doing that as a woman, which, if you're coming out of a very stoically recalcitrant, conservative Christian background, as a woman, and you're able to do that, that says a lot, not only about her, but also about the malleability of that culture.